My sister looked me dead in the eye at her reception and whispered into the microphone, "You're nothing without us." The entire room of 200 guests fell dead silent before my own father let out a cruel laugh. They had hidden me at table 18, the absolute worst table in the back, right next to the kitchen doors, treating me like an embarrassing charity case. I sat there frozen, my chest tightening as the whispers began. But the smug smile on my sister's face vanished a second later. The groom suddenly went entirely pale, his eyes locked on me, trembling. Beside him, his billionaire father, a man who practically owned the city, stepped forward, his glass shattering on the floor. He didn't see a black sheep. He saw the woman who had saved his life. He stammered into the silence. Wait. You're the girl who... And that's when their perfect world completely unraveled. My name is Clara, and at 28 years old, I had finally learned that you can't buy class, but you can certainly try to lease it. That was exactly what my family was doing at my sister Vanessa's wedding. Vanessa had spent her entire life as the undisputed golden child of our household, beautiful, fiercely manipulative, and profoundly superficial. She was our father's absolute pride and joy. To him, Vanessa could do no wrong, mostly because she chased the exact kind of shallow, high society validation he craved. I, on the other hand, was the designated family outcast, the black sheep who didn't fit the picture-perfect aesthetic. My accomplishments were routinely ignored, brushed off as boring or embarrassing because they couldn't be flaunted on social media. But today was Vanessa's ultimate triumph. She was marrying Julian, the sole heir to a massive tech empire. His father was Arthur Vance, a high-profile billionaire who practically owned half the real estate and infrastructure in the state. For weeks, my father and sister had been practically vibrating with social climbing ecstasy, treating this merger of families as their ticket to the global elite. I had flown in quietly, hoping to simply stand in the background, fulfill my duty as a sister, and keep the peace. I expected the usual cold shoulders and passive-aggressive remarks, but I hadn't realized just how far they were willing to go to make sure I knew my place beneath their newly polished billionaire-adjacent feet. While Vanessa had spent her 20s chasing clout and burning through our father's money, I had taken a completely different path. At 23, I quietly packed my bags and joined the military, eventually earning my commission as a high-ranking officer and trauma surgeon. I sacrificed comfort for service, deploying to some of the most volatile regions on the globe. To my family, however, my career was a profound embarrassment. They treated my enlistment like a rebellious phase or a failure to secure a corporate job, completely ignoring my promotions and refusing to look at pictures of me in my uniform. Because they never bothered to ask, they remained completely oblivious to the reality of my life and the classified incident that occurred overseas just 8 months ago. During a brutal deployment, a private security convoy carrying high-profile civilian contractors was ambushed in a burning compound under heavy enemy fire. As the lead trauma surgeon and tactical officer on duty, I didn't wait for backup. I led a high-stakes rescue mission into the heart of the conflict, pulling survivors from the wreckage and performing life-saving emergency surgeries right there in the dirt. For my actions, I was awarded the Purple Heart and a classified commendation for extreme heroism. I returned home with scars, a deep sense of purpose, and a medal my family would never see, because to them, a woman in uniform didn't fit the billionaire aesthetic they were so desperate to project to their new high society in-laws. I arrived at the grand estate where the wedding was being held, intentionally choosing a modest, high-necked navy blue dress. I wanted to keep the focus entirely on Vanessa and hide the physical reminders of my service. I wasn't looking for praise. I just wanted to get through the night without a scene. But the moment I stepped inside the venue, my family's true intentions became glaringly clear. Less than an hour before the ceremony, Vanessa's wedding coordinator approached me with a tight, apologetic smile and informed me that my bridesmaid duties had been canceled. Vanessa had decided to restructure the wedding party at the last minute, replacing me with one of Julian's wealthy socialite cousins. When I confronted my sister and father in the bridal suite, they didn't even have the decency to look guilty. My father didn't look up from his phone, while Vanessa merely smirked, adjusting her expensive veil. She looked me up and down with open disdain and told me that my short hair and rigid posture simply didn't fit the soft, romantic aesthetic of a billionaire's bridal party. My father finally chimed in, saying it was better this way, so I wouldn't feel out of place among people who actually belonged in high society. The final blow came when I was handed my new seat assignment, Table 18. It was located at the absolute back of the cavernous reception hall, hidden entirely behind a massive floral pillar and situated right next to the swinging kitchen doors. I was exiled to the table reserved for the hired photographers, the backup musicians, and a few distant acquaintances who had only been invited out of obligation. They had quite literally hidden me away, determined to keep the family outcast completely invisible from their elite new inner circle. The clinking of crystal glasses echoed through the ballroom as the formal toasts began, but the polite atmosphere shattered the moment Vanessa took the microphone. Standing at the magnificent head table drenched in the glow of $1,000 spotlights, she looked every bit the triumphant princess she always believed she was. But instead of focusing her speech entirely on her new husband, Julian, or thanking the guests, her glittering eyes swept across the room, deliberately searching until they locked onto me back at table 18. A cruel, calculated smile spread across her face as she cleared her throat. She began speaking into the microphone, her voice carrying flawlessly to all 200 guests. She launched into a passive-aggressive narrative about how difficult it must be for some people to watch others achieve true happiness and success. Then, looking directly at me, she said, "We all have that one lost soul in the family who never quite figured out how to build a real life or amount to anything. But we're glad you could take a break from your little adventures to see what real accomplishment looks like." She paused for dramatic effect, letting the insult hang in the air before delivering the final devastating blow. "After all, Clara, you're nothing without us." My father didn't hesitate. He let out a loud, supportive laugh that encouraged a few other social climbers at his table to chuckle along. The rest of the elite crowd shifted uncomfortably, a heavy, awkward silence settling over the room. I sat frozen at my hidden table, the ambient heat from the nearby kitchen doors suddenly feeling unbearable. My chest tightened as the whispers started buzzing around me, but I kept my chin up, refusing to let them see me break. The formal toasts concluded, and the lively music swelled as the head table began making its traditional rounds to greet the guests. I watched from afar as Vanessa and Julian basked in the adulation, with my father trailing closely behind them like a proud peacock. Eventually, Julian's billionaire father, Arthur Vance, detached himself from a group of local politicians and began walking toward the back of the cavernous room, politely greeting people as he moved. He wasn't even supposed to look toward table 18, but as he bypassed a serving cart near the kitchen doors, the harsh overhead light caught my face, and his eyes locked onto me. Arthur froze mid-stride. The heavy crystal Scotch glass in his hand slipped from his fingers, shattering loudly against the polished marble floor and sending amber liquid splashing across the pristine linen tablecloths nearby. The immediate surrounding tables went dead silent, and Vanessa immediately rushed over, her face twisted in artificial concern as she cried out, asking if he was all right or if the catering staff had done something wrong. Arthur completely ignored his new daughter-in-law, his eyes wide and trembling as he stared directly at me through the gap in the floral pillars. The color had entirely drained from his face, replaced by a look of profound, overwhelming shock. He didn't see an awkward, plain outcast in a modest navy dress. He recognized me instantly as Major Clara, the fearless military trauma surgeon who had pulled his bloodied, unconscious body from a burning tactical vehicle during that terrifying ambush overseas. The very woman who had single-handedly kept his heart beating in the dirt while under heavy enemy fire. Arthur pushed right past Vanessa and my father, completely brushing them aside as if they were ghosts. The entire ballroom watched in stunned silence as the billionaire tech mogul walked straight toward the worst seat in the house, stopping directly in front of table 18. Without a shred of his usual corporate detachment, Arthur bowed his head in profound, solemn respect. Julian, the groom, rushed over behind his father, his face morphing from confusion to sheer, unadulterated horror as he finally recognized me from the highly classified military photographs his father kept locked in his private study. Vanessa's smug smile completely dissolved, replaced by a mask of sheer panic. My father stepped forward, nervously stammering that there must be some kind of mistake, explaining that I was just the family's unaccomplished black sheep who didn't belong at a high society event. Arthur turned on them, his voice booming across the silent ballroom, utterly dripping with fury. He loudly demanded to know why a decorated national hero, a brilliant trauma surgeon, and the very woman who had saved his life during a bloody ambush overseas was being treated like absolute garbage by a family of superficial social climbers. He pulled the truth right out into the light, exposing my true military rank, my Purple Heart, and my extreme heroism to all 200 guests. The elite crowd gasped, turning their eyes onto Vanessa and my father with expressions of absolute disgust, while the sister who had just claimed I was nothing without them stood frozen, exposed as a cruel, insignificant fraud. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic for Vanessa. Arthur made it clear right then and there that he would cut Julian off from the family fortune entirely if he remained tied to a family so malicious and deceitful. Leaving them to squabble in the ruins of their ruined social ambitions, I calmly stood up from table 18, gave Arthur a respectful nod, and walked out of the ballroom into the crisp night air, completely free of their shadow. Have you ever had a family member try to humble you, only for life to humble them instead? Comment the city you are watching from and tell me your thoughts below. Don't forget to watch the next story on your screen.